Today, it's such a pleasure to see so many youngsters here engaging with policy issues. And actually, when you think about what Mahi has just mentioned, we are engaging with policy issues in a constructive manner. The government has put out something there, has asked for inputs, and so we had one meeting already, and we are trying to talk to the students, and our aim is to provide some input to the government. Let us see what they do with it. But before I get deeper into the subject, I do want to mention 3-4 crucial things. Today, in terms of how we're going to discuss these matters, I was just telling Professor Mishra, and that's why this is how I would also like to break up the division of paper here. Okay. Basically, this topic has 2 or 3 different dimensions. One dimension is the actual technical dimension, the nitty-gritty of education policy, what works, what doesn't work, etc. And then, of course, there is the political dimension. What could be the agenda of this government, what is visible, what is invisible, what has been the track record, as I already talked about this government's track record when it comes to engaging with some of the best universities in the country and their students. And so that part, there is a significant impact on teachers and professors, and there's also a significant impact on students and your freedom to be able to engage with issues on campus and things like that, right? So I thought in terms of our own division, so that we don't repeat each other, that I'd focus a little bit more on the technical, boring, nitty-gritty side, and the professorial, on the impact on faculty, the experience on the political side, Professor Mishra will share with you, and our NSUI president, new NSUI president, Amrita Dhawan, when she comes, that she could engage with the issue of student politics and what else this government is proposing. Before I get started, I must tell you that whatever we're going through right now is indicative, symptomatic of how this government deals with issues. This is supposed to be a draft of the new education policy. It is not a draft of the new education policy. It is a report by the JSR Subramaniam Committee, which is an input into the new education policy. We are going to give our input, they have given their inputs. But what is that policy? What are they actually planning to do? All that is hardly visible to all of us. Okay? So basically, this has the potential for them to justify and say, yeah, we took inputs, but they may have taken inputs on one set of things and not on other crucial, politically important, significant factors which will affect the future of higher education, school education, the entire sector. When we think about this, it is very rare for them to actually be explicit in what their agenda is. Once in a while they let it loose. It comes out. And recently, one Minister of State was sacked for his area, who was the Minister of State for HRDs. He made a public statement, I don't know whether he was sacked for that reason, but he certainly made a public statement that saffronization of education is going to happen, saffronization of India is going to happen. That was his basic point. Okay? Anyway, so he let the cat out of the bag, very, very clear what the agenda of the government is. Now, we had a very combative, capable, fiery HRD minister until very recently, and she would keep getting into fights with everybody. If somebody addressed her as dear Smriti Irani ji, she would get upset about that also. Okay, and that is, as far as I'm concerned, certainly quite respectful of anybody. Anyway, so she has now been moved out because controversies were trailing her every moment. The person who has replaced her, Prakash Javadekar, is a Sanghi to the core and a very, very smooth gentleman, and therefore much more dangerous than Smriti Irani in terms of what he is capable of achieving, what he is capable of attempting anyway. Achieving that we have to prevent, attempting that they will do. And that's our job to ensure that we don't let it go through. He has been already very, very cordial. Just a few days ago, it was Guru Purnima, and he said, he called me and he said, I've discovered that there are 40, 50 professors in Parliament, so I'm going to call all of you for lunch and honor you on Guru Purnima. And we said, very nice gesture. Okay, we went, of course. Tomorrow, he's hosting a lunch for the members of the Standing Committee on HRD. I'm a member of that as well. So, in terms of reaching out, in terms of ensuring that the opposition is nice to him, he's certainly making all the right moves. So we have to be doubly alert as to what might actually come through after all this. But people with experience of the entire political system here in Delhi and how it works, Professor Mishra will talk on that side. Let me just take up 3-4 main key issues that we are facing. And these are not issues that are necessarily political, but they have an impact. They have an equity-related impact on who gets a chance to get good education and who doesn't. How are we going to improve the system? Ultimately, our aim should be what is out there in that preamble of our Constitution, equality of status and opportunity, right? How do we ensure that equality of opportunity for the 120 million, 1.2 billion Indians that are out there, and a large fraction of whom are still trying to get an education and move forward. Now, when we start thinking about this, let's just break this down into 2-3 domains. If you look at school education, right, clearly there are some real problems in school education. When we ran the UPA government, we were very concerned that children were coming in relatively unprepared and that the schools were not doing enough for them and that they would be thrown out because of assessment very early and they would lose their chance to catch up and grow. So we ensured that they would not be tested until the 8th grade and there was this no detention policy. Now, after a few years of experience with the new detention policy, we were looking at the evidence. We want to see our children, the slogan is children in school and learning well, right? Children in school, has that been accomplished? Certainly with the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and how the UPA government implemented it, certainly with midday meal schemes, etc. We as a nation have done a wonderful job of practically ensuring that every child is in school. The other part, the operative and crucial part, learning well, that is not working as well as we'd like it to work. And there are reports from various NGOs. The ASAR report, which says that children in the 5th grade cannot do second grade math, things like that. They're not able to write or read. These are all failures of the system as we know it. So, what do we do? So one suggestion that is out there right now is to introduce exams and grading or some kind of assessment at the 5th grade, right? And this is not, the aim is not to detain children, the aim is not to throw children off the track, but to identify and see who is learning and who is not, in order that we may introduce remedial measures to ensure that those who are falling behind catch up and continue to proceed. So this is something that we need to think through. Should we support it? Should we not? What is what is in the interest of our children? So that's one of the concerns that has come up. And we're very worried that if we wait till the 8th grade, then it's not possible to repair at that stage. What do? Right? You're losing talent, you're losing brains, all because we fail to put in the effort to give them a good education. Right? So that's one crucial issue. Another crucial issue has to do with the teachers, how well trained they are they present in the classroom and teaching, what kind of teaching are they delivering, right? All those sorts of issues. And there, we are discovering that a lot of teacher training institutions are not of particularly good quality. So that's a whole other dimension that needs to be revamped and enhanced. And that there is a lot of teacher absenteeism, there is a lot of, there are situations where teachers are being assigned to election duty, census duty, some other duty, disaster relief duty, things like that. And so they're not spending enough time in the classroom. Many schools are suffering also from a very, they have very few teachers compared to the number of students that they have. And therefore, that teacher-student ratio is being affected. Now, This is happening in government schools. And across the country, historically, government schools have been the platform for ensuring equal access to education for everybody. Nowadays, what's happening is, as the quality of government school education comes down, you see people saying, we will go to any private school, how much ever we have to pay for it, just because we are confident that we'll get a better education there. Now, this is a challenge. And this is a challenge to our fundamental ideas of equity and justice and equal access. Right? So we have to find ways to fix the government system and ensure that their doors become open once again for youngsters to get a good education. That is the promise that the government has made. That is the promise that we must honor. Turning to other domains. If we turn to, say, higher education, there are numerous issues. One, of course, is this whole issue of whether freedom of expression is allowed in these campuses. Now, we've seen the history so far, and just last week, what did we see in Pondicherry, right? There is a student magazine that comes out in Pondicherry. There is one article there which criticizes the government, which uses the word institutional murder in it, and therefore, the new dictator, president for life, whatever, Pondicherry, Dhiman, makes the public statement that magazine should be pulled off, that the students are not allowed to write anything against the government in a campus publication. Okay. If you remember, the same Kiran Bedi a couple of years ago was out campaigning against the government, and very, very quickly, the moment she has been given something, she has forgotten, she has sold out and is now trying to impose some other, practically a fascistic approach to what is allowed and what is not allowed. Let's see if Amrita comes and she can talk a little bit more about that, otherwise Professor Mishra will. Let's get to the more interesting and complicated issues in higher education. Right? What is the role of regulatory institutions in higher education? How much freedom should universities have to experiment, to come up with new kinds of programs, to come up with programs that are not just 3 years for a graduate degree, but maybe 4 years, maybe 5 years, who come up with different kinds of experiments? Should these be under the regulation of one body like the UPC, which then insists that we have to go back to a recommendation of 10 plus 2 plus 3 from the 1960s, and that anything else is not allowed? Right? So what is how can we, in a modern situation, work in an environment where we cannot experiment, where universities don't have the freedom to experiment? What can we do? How do we ensure that faculty have the freedom to innovate, to come up with their own programs? It's our pleasure to welcome Amrita Dhawan, our new president of the NSUI. Well, I haven't had a chance to congratulate you either, so congratulations and all the very best for that job. We're all part of the Congress spokesperson team. And anyway, so here's the situation where there are numerous universities within the country. What we need is a minimum guarantee of quality. What we need is some minimum guarantee to ensure that students are getting whatever learning was promised. Right? Instead of that, we get regulations which say, do you have 1 acre of field? Do you have 200 books in your library? Do you have, all sorts of quantitative numbers, records old policy measures without being up to date to what else is possible. So the regulatory institutions are certainly failing in their approach. They are using these rules as an excuse to clamp down on innovation, on various other possibilities. This, of course, became a crisis in the context of Delhi University's 4-year undergraduate program. But that had its own controversies. The way it was introduced was, it was shoved down the throat of students. So that's certainly not a model on how you go about introducing new programs or whether you make it mandatory for everyone. The other issue, of course, is also whether you shut them down the way the new government did. That's another concern with higher education. Another concern, of course, both at the school level and at higher education level, is this whole notion of skills. Very, very importantly, let me also welcome Atiba Amin from the NSUI to join us. So there is a lot of emphasis on skilling, right? Now, where does this emphasis come from? It comes from a fear on the part of many people that the education that we're providing them in a college environment or a school environment is nice in terms of knowledge, but it doesn't make them practically useful in the real world. So we need to take a step back and say, yes, of course, skills and practical skills are important, but what is the purpose of education? Is it only to go there and get a job in some factory? Is there some, are we investing our nation's resources in our people, the most valuable resource that we have? Aren't we trying to expand their mind? Are we trying to enrich them with an understanding of history and what it takes to live in a democracy and respect one another and our rights and everything else that goes with making a good citizen? Education is not just about knowledge or skills. It is a project where we invest in our citizens and allow that citizenship understanding to flower. We also want to encourage people to be creative, to be innovative, and to be critical thinkers. We don't want automatons who will never raise their opinion, who will never ask a question, and that is really one of the other worries that we have. That if we just focus on skilling to the exclusion of everything else, we just have a bunch of workers, we won't have thinkers, we won't have questioners, and we won't have citizens who can engage and make this democracy a vibrant democracy that it should be. So, on that front, again, when the vision of skilling is also very limited, nobody is thinking of skilling beyond the first job. It is not a question. I'm personally worried that people will be told right up front in their school days that, okay, you are not fit for higher education, you please go and become trained in some vocational field, and that's the end. You are going to spend the rest of your life, turning some part in some factory. The truth of the matter is, skilling and that alternative track should also be a career. People should get the skills to break into something, into a field, but after that, you need to create a whole ecosystem to ensure that youngsters can continue to add additional skills, additional knowledge, and rise up the ladder, that they may be able to go